Dr. Eric Parker, a renowned surgeon, was in the middle of a critical operation when police officers burst into the OR. His daughter, Mia, just 10 years old, watched in confusion and horror as her father was handcuffed and led away. Known for his dedication and skill, Eric's sudden arrest during such a delicate moment sent shockwaves through the hospital. Mia, bewildered and scared, couldn't understand what was happening. Why would anyone arrest her dad, especially during surgery? Yet. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Mia's world crumbled when she learned the shocking reason behind her father's arrest, vowing never to speak to him again. Mia had been sitting on a bench in a park outside of the hospital where her dad worked when it happened. She was there with her mother, eating a sandwich as they waited for her dad to finish his shift. And how much longer, Mom, she had asked at one point, as she was really excited to see her father again. Just be patient, sweetie. He'll be here soon, her mother, Christina, had told her. He had told her he'd text her as soon as his surgery was done, but when she saw that she had no messages yet, she thought that perhaps he had wanted to surprise them well. She was wrong about that, but she was definitely surprised by what she saw next. Mia hadn't noticed it yet, and she was still smiling as she approached her father, who turned pale with shock as soon as he laid eyes on her. Maya was just about to ask him whether everything was all right when she noticed an officer was walking next to him, looking very serious and angry even. Mia, sweetie, please go home. I love you, Eric called out to her as the officer guided him to her car, which was parked just outside the hospital. Mia was completely shocked by what she was seeing, and her mother had joined her by then as well. Mom, help him, she yelled while the tears streamed down her face. Christina couldn't believe what was happening and she ran to the car, slamming her fists on the window. Eric, what is happening? This has to be a mistake. Please, you have to let him go, she screamed, but the officer simply instructed her to get away from the car. After the car had left, Christina got herself together. She wanted to be strong for Mia and told her daughter to get in the car. They were going to the station immediately to find out what was going on. Mia and Christina rushed through the sliding doors of the police station, desperate for answers. The more they asked, the less they knew. Officers shuffled past, avoiding eye contact. Mia tugged at her mom's sleeve, frustration mounting. Why won't they tell us anything, she whispered. Christina shook her head, her face a mask of determination and worry. They felt stuck, surrounded by the buzz of police radios and the shuffle of boots, yet isolated in their urgent need for clarity. The door finally opened and Eric was let in, handcuffs linking his wrists. Eric's appearance shocked them both. His surgical scrubs were wrinkled and stained, his hair unkempt. Dark circles under his eyes told of stress and sleepless hours. Outside, Mia slumped onto a cold metal bench. Her mind raced with questions, each one deepening the knot of worry in her stomach. Back in the room, Eric and Christina spoke in hushed tones. The charges are severe, Eric murmured, his face pale. Christina's hands trembled slightly as she listened, her eyes never leaving his. But I didn't do it, Christina, Eric added quickly, his voice firm yet desperate. After what felt like hours, Christina reappeared in the doorway. Everything will be okay, she whispered, giving Mia a tight hug. Together, they walked towards the exit of the station, the evening air cool against their faces. The car ride home was quiet, the city lights blurring past as Christina drove. The house felt different, heavier somehow as they moved through the evening routines. Dinner was quiet, the usual chatter replaced by a thick silence that neither seemed able to break. The air was filled with unasked questions and unspoken worries. The next morning at school, Maya felt eyes on her as she walked through the halls. Whispers followed her from locker to classroom, each word like a small sting. Walking down the crowded school hallway, Mia caught snippets of conversations. Did you hear about her dad? One voice snickered. He's a criminal, another chimed in, laughter following the harsh words. She needed to understand what was being said about her dad. With a deep breath, she logged onto a school computer, her fingers hesitating just a moment before she typed his name into the search bar. She scanned the room, ensuring no one was watching. The screen filled with headlines and Mia's eyes widened as she clicked on the first article. It detailed the date and time of Eric's arrest, along with vague mentions of the charges without much detail. Mia scanned the article, her focus narrowing as she absorbed every word. As Mia clicked through more articles, she gathered bits and pieces of the alleged charges against her father. Each report was heavy with legal terminology, but she pieced together enough to grasp the seriousness of the accusations. Her breathing grew shallow, her eyes never left the screen. The bell for the end of lunch rang unnoticed by her, her entire being focused on the glowing words that painted her father in such an unfavorable light. Anger and confusion swirled within her as she tried to reconcile the father she knew with the one being described in the reports. The loud ring of the school bell snapped Mia back to reality. She quickly shut down the computer, her thoughts still swirling. Standing up, she barely noticed the other students bustling around her, all rushing to their next class. Mia couldn't sit through another class, not with her thoughts in turmoil. She left the school grounds, her pace fast and determined as she headed home. Mia stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her. "Mom, what's going on with Dad?" "I saw the articles." Christina, taken aback by Mia's sudden entrance and sharp tone, dropped the book she was holding. Aye. "Let's sit down and talk about this," she stuttered, her mind racing to formulate a response to Mia's pointed questions. "I was going to tell you," Christina began, her voice weak. She tried to explain the little she knew, but her words seemed to stumble over each other. Mia's eyes, filled with tears and frustration, didn't miss the hesitation. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Mia accused, unable to contain her anger. Mia turned on her heel and stormed up. Reaching her room, she slammed the door shut and turned the lock with a sharp click. Christina made frequent visits to the detention center, hoping each time to understand more about Eric's situation. While she would sit across from him, her notebook filled with questions and notes from their previous discussions. Eric looked tired but was always eager to clarify things, hoping to ease her worries. Each visit ended with Christina feeling a mixture of hope and confusion, her resolve to support Eric unwavering. "Do you want to come with me to see Dad?" Christina asked Mia one morning, a hopeful tone in her voice. Mia shook her head, her expression stubborn. "No, thanks," she muttered, barely looking up from her breakfast. Christina sighed, her heart aching at the distance between Mia and Eric. She left the house, her keys jangling in her hand, a silent reminder of the growing gap within their family. As the trial started, Christina was there in the front row of the courtroom every day. She took meticulous notes, her eyes rarely straying from the proceedings. Each witness called and each piece of evidence presented, she followed with intense focus, trying to understand the depth of the situation her husband was in. Despite Christina's attempts to involve her, Mia refused to attend the trial. "I can't see him," she said quietly whenever her mother asked. She couldn't bring herself to face the courtroom, the lawyers, or her father. Instead, Mia spent her days distracted at school and restless at home, avoiding conversations about the trial and burying herself in schoolwork and music, trying to keep the reality of her father's situation at bay. As the trial progressed, local media swarmed the courthouse, eager to cover the sensational story of a respected doctor facing serious charges. Reporters often approached Christina, who politely declined to comment. As more witnesses testified, the evidence stacked against Eric seemed overwhelming. Each testimony was more damning than the last, with detailed descriptions of the alleged misconduct. Mia, passing by the kitchen, overheard her mother on the phone discussing Eric's trial. "Oh, it doesn't look good," Christina said, her voice strained. Mia paused, her hand on the wall for support. The reality of her father's possible future hit her hard. She felt a growing sense of dread, her previous anger mingling with fear. Quietly, she retreated to her room, the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. As the trial progressed, the looming possibility of a lengthy sentence for Eric became the dominant topic in the courtroom corridors. Legal analysts speculated about years behind bars. In a dramatic turn, new evidence emerged in the courtroom. A series of emails and documents were presented, suggesting that Eric had been framed by a colleague. Christina gasped, her hands covering her mouth in shock, while Eric's face showed the first signs of relief in weeks. Further investigation revealed the motive behind the framing: envy. Eric's colleague, who had long coveted his position and recognition, had orchestrated the scheme. Details of the colleague's actions unfolded through more uncovered emails and covert recordings. The prosecution, caught off guard, huddled in urgent conversation, their case unraveling. In the courtroom, papers shuffled and laptops clicked rapidly as attorneys adjusted their approaches. The atmosphere in the courtroom and at home began to shift from despair to cautious optimism. Eric walked through the door, a free man. Kishan, Eric paused, his eyes meeting hers, a gentle smile spreading across his face. He set down his bag and opened his arms, inviting her closer. Mia hesitated, then moved forward, the initial awkwardness lingering in the air as they embraced. Later, sitting at the kitchen table, Mia and Eric finally talked. Eric recounted the details of his exoneration while Mia listened intently, nodding. They discussed the evidence that had reached him, and Eric explained how he always believed the truth would prevail. Mia absorbed every word, the barriers between them beginning to crumble as understanding and relief replaced the doubts that had once clouded their relationship. Mia took a deep breath, her voice soft. "Dad, I'm sorry I doubted you," she said. Eric shook his head gently, taking her hand. "There's nothing to apologize for, Mia. It was a hard time for all of us," he replied, his tone forgiving. Their conversation marked a turning point, mending the rift that had grown between them during the months of uncertainty and fear. That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, laughter and chatter filling the room. The air was lighter, the meal a celebration of their reunion and Eric's cleared name. They talked about future plans, the atmosphere imbued with optimism. For the first time in months, they felt a complete sense of togetherness, embracing a hope